Okay then, so that's all been done. I've done a still picture for you, and you know, it's looking nice, weathered. It's looking quite dirty, a bit exaggerated, but we should have no problem with that when it kind of we put the gloss coats on everything. So now we've got, okay, all our top camo to do. But to do the top camo, we've got to mask up all this, okay, and make sure that we don't get any of the top camo kind of ruining all this. So we've got to mask it up, and it just makes it a lot easier, personally, to, you know, not just go ahead and just start masking and then spray the other side, you know, to reduce that kind of, when you mask up, it peeling off and everything. I find that there's no problem just coming along, okay, with the gloss and just putting a nice little gloss coat down, okay. And this is just nice and simple, okay. You just spray it on top like you would a normal base coat, okay. You're just putting a nice light coat on. You're about 3 or 4 inches away from the model, okay, about 15 psi, okay. You can spray this on nice and neat. Right, it is nice, quick and easy. Okay, you do have to, you know, give this a bit of time to dry before you go off masking, but you know, it does help save your work, and it's better than, you know, risking it, slapping on some masking tape, and if you get something like it peeling, it can be a bit of a nightmare to like spray it all back in nice. Okay, so I always like to save my work whenever possible. Okay, and as I've already said, you know, nice first coat, and then, you know, put one more coat on afterwards. So 2 coats in total should be more than enough to nicely save your work. Not only that, I mean, once we've done all our spraying, I mean, we've got to come along anyway and put a gloss coat onto the model ready for decaling. So, you know, I mean, you're already building up that gloss coat by doing this, so then when you do come round to put that final gloss coat on, you haven't got to put that much gloss on. So you know, we're only doing what we need to do anyway. Now, as you're probably noticing as I'm spraying this, okay, the model, the colours are starting to darken up, okay, and that's what's happening with this. It's starting to get a little bit darker, which is what our gloss does. It just darkens up the colours. Okay, and then when we come round to doing our matte coat, it will lighten it up, and all these different tones and weathering will just merge a bit. Okay, so that now has had a nice little gloss coat on it, enough to be able to nice and easily mask. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for about an hour, and then we can mask up, okay, and start looking at doing our, I think it's called a splinter camo. Okay, right then, as you can see, I've masked up here. All our gloss coats has had time to dry, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start spraying in some little bits here and there. You've probably noticed that our landing gear has been sprayed, masked up. Now, normally I would spray the landing gear and then I'd fill it with like foam or blue tack or some sort of masking up to kind of protect the colour in there. But with this particular kit, we had to have our landing gear partly built inside, because it's actually built into the wing. And because you've got all this kind of landing gear going on in here, it's going to be kind of tricky to mask that up, to put blue tack in there, to get some sort of foam to protect the paint and keep the paint from being sprayed our underside colour. So in this case, what I did, I thought, okay, our landing gear area is nice and square. Actually, it was quite easy to just mask up around, as you can see. So what I can do now is I can just simply spray our landing gear. And what I'm using Vallejo 050 light grey, and it's basically a light aircraft grey, and I'm just gonna spray inside, okay, and get all our wheel wells, part built landing gear all sprayed, our light aircraft grey basically. And although I've masked this up, I mean, there's still areas that aren't masked up, so you still want to be careful of overspray. Okay, right then. So now I've gone round and I've just got that all nice and light aircraft grey again. We've got quite a bit of mixture left over, so I'm just going to pop the top off of here. I'm going to pour it back in because we don't want to waste a load of paint for no reason. And I've not mixed that with any thinners, I did spray it neat, okay. Now also on this one, we've got a nice little pattern where our little tips here have got to be white. But before we do that, I just want to do a quick colour change. Okay, and I'll just move the set away because I don't want to get bits of thinners and paint on. Same as usual, tip your cup upside down and try and rub out any paint that's in here. Okay, any flaky, dry bits that we don't want to go through the needle end. Okay. Spray that through. Bit of Vallejo airbrush cleaner. Spray this into here until we start seeing nice clear thinners. Well, airbrush cleaner. Okay, that's looking good. Right then, the white, I'm going to go neat with the white as well, okay, because white is one of these nasty colours as well that you seem to do loads and loads and loads of coats if you do a 50-50 mix, but if you go neat, okay, we can get this down quite nicely. Right. And this is, excuse me, has been nicely masked up here, okay. I'm going to check our flow and we're just going to start spraying this white. Okay, make sure you get your leading edges. Okay. There we go, almost nice and white there. Because we've gone neat, you know, that has gone down a lot quicker than if I'd mixed it with thinners. It would have ended up taking quite a few coats. Need a bit more PSI, maybe 25 PSI though, to spray neat. Make sure we've got some good coverage. And make sure you get them leading edges. Okay. Okay, so what I've just done now is I've just sprayed this white, and I think I'm going to save you a bit of watching time here. I'll spray the other side, and what I'll do is I'll do the usual kind of like bleaching and post shading to weather these up as well, okay, but you've already kind of seen that on the underneath side, so I'll just quickly get all that done, and then we can demask and we can start thinking about the camo on the top side. Right then, as you can see, we've got all our bits of weathering done, okay, and we've demasked, and we've got all our wheel wells all nice and light aircraft grey. We've got our tips done white, they've been weathered in just the same, okay, and what we need to do now is we need to start looking at doing our splinter camo pattern. So we've got to do some masking, okay, so just to show you a bit about masking, I'll just get some masking tape. We got a first nice little bit here, just along our fuselage, okay, get a nice strip around about what the length is, okay, and it basically, if you want to start one end, okay, and hold your thumb the one end, and not kind of, you don't want to kind of follow it across like this and try and get the right kind of, try and get the shape that way, because if you do that, all you're going to do is not get a straight line. You want to try and hold it one end, and then just with your other thumb here, this one here, just take it right to where you want it to end, okay, and then you've got that in place, and then you can run your finger across, and then that should be a much nicer, straighter line, okay, and we can get that down nicely. The other thing is as well, we've got a nice, it's not exactly a straight edge going on here, okay, so we've got a little bit of a tricky part, so I'm going to use jammy dog tape, okay, because we need to not have a straight line, but it's like a curve, okay, so to get this curve it needs to start from where the flap is. This might be tricky for me to do this and try and keep it on camera, okay, which yes it is going to be, okay, so we need to start that nicely at our flap, and then trying to get my thumb in a position, okay, and we need to put a curve in this that's supposed to go up like that. It's just supposed to be a nice curve that then meets this nice straight line, okay. Now with this jammy dog tape you can kind of maneuver it still, even though it's stuck down, you can kind of push it where you want it a bit and get those curves a bit better, maybe just using your nail or something, okay, and that looks not quite there yet, okay, that looks pretty good. So then we could come along and we can just make sure we're not going to get any overspray while we're spraying this, okay, so as you can see I've just put some tape there, just covering it up now, okay, so there we have our shall we say our first line, and that will give us a nice kind of curvy line here using the jammy dog tape, and a nice straight line with our Tamiya tape going all the way along, okay. So basically there is a lot of masking going on with this one, because we have got well, we're going to be spraying our camo pattern underneath here, which means our elevators here I mean, really, it would be a good idea to mask these up as well, because they're probably going to get overspray quite easily. We've also got a lot of stuff going on around our engines and front fuselage. Okay, we need to mask up around the front fuselage as well. And then we've got this pattern of, you still get some of our camo pattern coming here, just on the left and right side of both engines. Okay, and the top part is still supposed to be our RLM 65. Okay, so that's going to be a bit tricky to get in there and sort of kind of like mask this top bit up, and then you've got to mask around so then you can spray in there. But it should look good when that's done. So I'm just gonna, you know, crack on with masking all this up rather than boring you with it, and then we can start looking at getting this splinter camo down. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show you how to do free-fall bombs before I continue with the JU88. What we're going to do is, I've poured in some XF65 field grey. I find this is a nice colour to give us our free-fall bomb type colour. And what I've done is I've poured it in neat. Okay, what I mean by neat is I've not thinned it down, I've just left it at the same thickness as it is out of the pot. Okay, putting it in neat. I've put my air pressure down to about 15 psi, so the air pressure's low as well. And what we're going to get is, instead of a nice spray pattern, okay, giving us a nice surface, what we're going to end up with, because there isn't enough air to atomize this thick paint, okay, what we're going to end up is a very speckly kind of spray. Because the way it works is, basically, the thicker the paint, okay, the more PSI, the more air pressure you need to atomize that paint into lots and lots of little atoms to give us that nice spray effect. Okay, so when you do something like I'm doing here, where not only is the paint thick, okay, because it's neat, but by also reducing the air pressure low as well to like 15 psi, what you get is instead of having lots of tiny particles coming out giving you a nice spray pattern, what you get is you get fewer particles and bigger particles, if you get me. So then you get this kind of big speckly effect. And what happens is when you spray, okay, what you'll get is all these lots of bigger particles, okay, and fewer particles, okay. So we can still spray, but what happens is the surface turns a little rough. Okay. Now I don't know how well you're going to see this on camera, because it is a nice light textured effect that we're going to get. Okay. Now I've just covered that. I've covered it quickly because the paint is neat, because the paint's thick. I've literally gone round that with one coat, and that is all it needs. But I don't know how, if you can see this on camera, but I'm looking at this now, and the surface is looking rough. Okay, it's a nice light roughness, which gives us that nice, more realistic look that you get with free fall bombs. Because if you look at free fall bombs, they can be like have a nice rough surface, and this is one nice way of getting that nice rough surface. Okay, and you're hearing this whistle, the airbrush. What that means is we're building up a blockage. Okay, and that's, you know, because the paint's so neat, it's going to dry quicker, and because we've got a low air pressure, it's just not getting it out as good, and it's slowly building up to having a bit of a blockage, and that's what the whistling is. Okay, but that is up. These four now are all nicely painted up, and they've all got this nice light rough textured effect to it, to kind of give these free fall bombs that nice little extra bit of detail. And it wasn't really that hard. I mean, you know, it wasn't as hard as coming along and thinning. In fact, it was easier, to be honest with you, because if we sprayed this normally, we would have had to put thinners in, mix it, and then spray it. This, in neat, low air pressure, spray, job done. Nice, easy, good effect of getting a nice, rough, textured surface to anything that you realistically want to give a nice kind of rough, textured surface. Okay, so I'll be back with the JU88. Right then, back to the JU88. We've got all our masking done. It was pretty tricky, kind of here and around, say, our two engines and around our bomb pylons and stuff. Bit tricky, but you'll get there. Just take your time, have the patience, and you know, you should get that all nice and done. Now we're going to start looking at the splinter camo. However, I came across a problem with RLM02. Okay, this is the colour that a customer wants on. It's RLM02, and I think it was RLM 70 or 71. But there seems to be something wrong with the extra acrylics RLM 02, which is XA1201. Now, because I thought there was something wrong with it, I did go off and I brought a second one, and the second one is just the same. So I don't know if I've been really unlucky here and ended up buying, shall we say, two default paints, but there's a problem with it. Now the problem is when you mix it into your cup, it's almost as if the different pigments in there seem to be reacting, separating, and can really kind of start to clog up, and you get these little tiny blobs of paint splatter out. Now when something like that happens, it would suggest to me that the paint's contaminated, or something's being contaminated somewhere, i.e. when you get those clumps of paint, it's normally when you're mixing, say, acrylic paints with, say, enamel thinners, okay, or vice versa. You get all this kind of snotty, gluey kind of consistency going on. However, you know, I have been using the actual acrylics thinners with these actual acrylic paints, and although it's not as bad as, shall we say, using acrylic paints with, say, enamel thinners, it's not as bad, but it's kind of just slightly touching on that kind of contamination. Okay, so I've had to have a bit of a play around and experimenting, and what I've kind of found out, strangely, is that our Vallejo airbrush thinners actually reacts better than the extra acrylic thinners with this particular paint, as well as you really do need to come along and really have a much more thinner consistency than normal to kind of battle against this weird separating, this weird kind of snotty build-up that splats out and looks pretty nasty. Okay, so what I've also done as well is I've deliberately give my airbrush a proper good cleaning as well, to make sure there is nothing nasty in here that could also react and have problems. So hopefully this will work. Hopefully I'm coming along, and I'm probably gonna go maybe something like 60% thinners to something like 40% paint, okay, specifically for this paint. Okay, and you might be able to see in a bit what I mean when I pour this in. Okay, I'm also going to use a paintbrush rather than a cocktail stick, okay, to really make sure we get this mixed nicely, and hopefully we're going to be okay. Now that is looking better already. Okay, So yes, very strange. Normal 50-50 mix with acrylic thinners made this paint go, it looked very black and mixy, and you had kind of black and grey and white, and it looked not really mixed when I used the 50-50 mix of acrylic thinners, but for some reason this seems to do the job. Okay, very strange, but sometimes that's what you have to deal with. So I'm just going to check my flow, and I just want to make sure I'm not getting these snotty bits, and I'm not, thankfully. So what we want to do now, okay, is we're all masked up, so we want to just get down a nice coat, okay, all round. Okay, now as I've said, okay, this is a thinner mixture. Okay, so we're probably going to have to put down 1 or 2 coats more than normal. And you're also probably thinking, okay, where's the splint camo pattern? Now, what I like to do with camo, okay, and you're probably thinking, actually, where's the pre-shading as well? I do find when putting camo down, I like to just put the first layer, which is the lighter colour, which in this case is the RLM02. I like to put down the lighter colour first, okay, and then I like to mask up, okay, to then spray the second camo on second. That's the way I like to do it. And because you basically, if I pre-shaded this and then obviously I put this coat all over and then I mask up for, you know, the second coat, which is like a green, the pre-shading isn't going to work. The green is just going to completely kill off any kind of pre-shading, so there's kind of no point putting it down. And to combat that, I like to make sure that I do some post-shading, okay, to make sure we're all sorted there on the weathering side. Okay, now another thing as well, when you come to, instead of like coming along and masking up all our leading edges, if you come in at, say, I don't know, maybe like a 75 sort of degree angle, well, so say about a 45 degree angle or something from the leading edge, and you spray it like this, okay, you should get a pretty, you know, fairly nice straight line sprayed in, because we're talking like it's the angle of spray, okay. If you come in at that exact angle and you hold that exact angle, you should get a nice straight line, because whatever sprays past the wing will just go under and not spray any of your underside, okay. So just try and keep that in mind. Make sure you get that same angle every time you spray there though. Okay. And as you can see, I mean, that is slowly turning our nice RLM02. It is taking a few more coats than normal, but it will get there, and that is actually spraying 1,000,000 times better than it was when using 50-50 mix and acrylic thinners. Very strange, but there you go, I've solved the problem for you. So I'm going to just spray all around this model and whatever little pieces, and then we'll get into some weathering. Right then, just sprayed all the way around, and we've had no problems with any kind of snotty, splattery bits going onto the model with this paint. So now we want to do some bleaching. Again, I'm going to come along with the Vallejo thinners in this case, and I'm just going to basically thin even more what I've got left over in my cup from spraying this, okay. I'm going to give that a mix because I want to just make sure this paint's going to be good. Okay, and I'm kind of not really trusting extra acrylics at the moment, so I'm going to use Vallejo white. Okay, stick with Vallejo while we're using their thinners, and I'm just going to put in a couple of drops of white into this much more thinner version. Okay, and that has gone maybe a bit too white, but if we're thin enough that shouldn't really hurt. Okay, so I'm going to check the flow with this. Okay, I'm just going to test it a quick bit on the model, and that looks actually quite good. Right then, so on this nice big areas with lots and lots of panels, we can just nice and randomly spray inside our panels, giving all sorts of motley effects, but within the panels. Okay, you don't want to be spraying on the panel line because that's where we're going to be doing post shading. And just give it a little bit of an exaggeration as well. Okay, because if you remember about the exaggeration, because these colours do merge a little bit. Okay, they do merge a bit when you put on gloss coats and matte coats. Okay, so there we go, pretty nice and quick. It's a bit exaggerated, but with some nice post shading on our panel lines and our camo pattern in there, that should look good. So I'm going to do the rest of the model doing this bit of bleaching inside the panel lines, but what I'm also going to do as well is I'm not going to post shade this after doing some bleaching. I want to mask up, put my second stage of camo down, and then post shade with both camo patterns down. This way you can kind of merge a little bit the two different colours of camo, you know, so they don't look quite, you know, 100% sharp bang, you know, two separate colours. You can just merge in a bit, because what you got to remember is when you get weathering and you've got two different camo patterns, what can happen is you know, the weathering that happens can actually sort of merge the two different colours together a bit. That gives you kind of like, you know, a different colour because they've mixed together. So by doing the post shading after you've got both camos down, you can do some nice merging. Okay, so I'll just carry on with this. Right then, I've gone round and I have done all the bleaching. I've also sealed in a quick gloss coat just to protect all our paintwork that we've got now, so as when we do our masking we don't have any peeling and all our paintwork's nice and protected. So what you want to do is you want to follow your instructions for the splinter camo pattern. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to cover up all our areas that need to be RLM 02 and leave blank all the areas that need to be RLM 71. So I've done a little bit, but what you need to do, get some nice I think it's 6mm tape. Okay, we can rip a bit of that off, and what we're going to do is we're just going to do our little section here. Okay, so we can start by cutting off a little bit just to give us a nice neat edge. Okay, and looking at the panel lines on our instructions and on the model itself, okay, we can kind of sort of give a best estimated guess as possible to where this will go. Okay, and it looks like we're going to be about here. Okay, now we need to give this a bit of a cut because we've got another little join here. Okay, and we end up with another nice neat edge, and we need to shorten this. Okay, and it's around about, it is actually about here. Okay, so just gonna place this down, and then we need to join these two pieces of masking tape up, so being kind of careful. Okay, and just trying to get this nice and lined up and nice and straight. Okay, which is a bit trickier than you think. Okay, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so we can get another piece now. Okay, make another one of these nice neat pointy edges. Okay, and this wants to go quite sharply in this direction like that. Okay, so we've got some nice sharp splintery camo pattern going on there, and again another piece. Okay, let's cut this nice neat edge again, and this one goes straight down. Pretty much. Okay, so there we go, we've just made part of our splinter camo there. Okay, fairly easy, it's a lot easier than some camo patterns. And then we've got this big, I think this is like the 40mm Tamiya tape. It's bigger, okay, you get a lot more, it is kind of like a nice money saver, and it covers a lot more area, and we can just cut this, okay, and we can just, you know, just slap this on, okay, just so that we have our RLM 02 areas pretty much nice and covered up. Okay, and then we've got our 16mm here just to tidy up the little areas. Okay, so as you can see, we have now nicely got this little area here masked up. Okay, and basically you can do that all the way across the model following the instructions. Nice easily splinter camo pattern, nicely protected with our gloss coat. So when I've got all this done, I'll be back with the final spray. Right, as you can see, all nicely masked up. Wasn't too bad. I did follow the instructions as best as I could, but to be honest with you, this camo pattern on the instructions is a bit not that accurate, in the sense that it's kind of hard to follow. So I did bring up some reference photos of what other people have done, the real aircraft and stuff, okay, just to try and get the camo pattern a bit better. So what we're going to do now, we're going to come along with our RLM 71, that's XA1205, give that a bit of a shake, okay, and then we're going to use our extra acrylic thinners, and it's going to be a 50-50 mix. Just get my pipette. Okay. Okay, it's about 50-50 mix. I'm probably not going to use much of this paint, to be honest, because it is only areas. Okay, and I'll just get my paintbrush wherever that's gone. Okay, and we'll just give it a nice mix, make sure it's all nicely mixed in, because extra acrylics can be a pain and a nightmare sometimes. Okay, so just checking how this is going to come out. Not looking too bad, and we should be able to hold this in places, and we just want to put that nice even coat on. Okay. Looking too wet, move on to somewhere else. Okay. Nice even coverage. First coat might be a bit not wanting to play nicely because we're spraying onto a gloss surface, but a nice kind of, as you can see, it's a bit of a misty coat going on, and then the second coat we do should be a lot better because paint does need something to stick to. Okay, just working my way around this now. Remember the say about a 45 degree angle-ish. Just make sure that you nicely stay at that angle, and you should get a relatively nice line for your leading edges. Now you could have, if you wanted to, done pre-shading. It's not impossible to not do it, it's just I prefer to forego all that time and effort when I can just nicely do it as a post shade. But if you're not too happy with post shading, I mean, you could have pre-shaded, put the main colour on top, okay, all over, and then you could have masked up like I've done, masking up here, and then you could have pre-shaded again and then put this coat on if you wanted to. But the choice is yours. It depends how you feel about post shading, really, because post shading can be a bit tricky. Okay, so I'm putting a second coat down on this now, and it's still looking quite blotchy and mottly. I think that's probably because I've got maybe a little bit of a thin mixture going on, but it's still quite nice. Okay, so I'm just quickly going to do this wing now for you. Cut into air to dry it a bit quicker. Okay, so as you can see, we've nicely sprayed up this one wing, and then what I'll do is, after doing this, I'll do the usual bleaching. I'll give it a quick sealing with a gloss coat, and then we can unmask all this and then finally get on with some post shading where we can merge in a little bit of the two different camos and get it looking nice and weathered.